the scariest stories are real, you'd probably think horror movies are just make-believe, right? Well, what if I told you the most terrifying horror movies you've ever seen are 100% real? You always tell yourself it's just a movie. The killer is just an actor. But what if that wasn't true? Today, we find out if these stories are just movies or if they're real life. Sometimes art doesn't just copy life. Sometimes it predicts it. These are the most insane cases where horror movies were either based on real events or even crazier. Real life copied the movie. Get ready, because today we are diving into the craziest horror stories that actually happened. We're talking about horror movies that literally predicted future crimes with insane accuracy. Now, some people will say this is all just a coincidence, that your brain is trying to connect dots that aren't there. A skeptic would say it's like looking at clouds with thousands of horror movies and millions of tragedies. Of course, some will eventually look like each other, but when you see the details, that logical explanation just isn't good enough. The similarities are so specific, so insane. They feel less like a random cloud and more like a cloud that has scales, wings, and a night on its back. We will investigate the most chilling cases where horror movies and reality became the same thing. Section 1. The monsters are real. True crime parallels 130 to 631st step. The most direct link between horror and reality. The monsters who are actually real. Some of the biggest villains in horror weren't made up. They were inspired by the insane crimes of real people. And there is no crazier example of this than a quiet guy from Wisconsin whose name would become a monstrous blueprint for movie villains for decades. Ed Gein, Case 1. Ed Gein, the man who inspired a genre in 1957. Police were looking for a missing store owner and went to Ed Gein's farmhouse. What they found inside is unbelievable, and it would inspire some of the biggest horror movies ever made. The house was a real-life house of horrors. The entire farmhouse was filled with things made from human body parts. We're talking bowls made from skulls, chairs stitched together with human skin, and lampshades made from human faces. This is not a joke. The newspapers called him the Butcher of Plainfield. The first character inspired by Guine was Norman Bates from Psycho. Guine's crazy obsession with his dead mom is the exact personality of Norman Bates, the motel owner who keeps his mom's corpse in the house. In 1974, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre gave us a killer who wears a mask made of human skin and lives in a house filled with furniture made from bones, lifted directly from the real-life horrors of Guine's house. And then you have Buffalo Bill from The Silence of the Lambs, the serial killer who skins his victims because he wants to make a woman's suit for himself. This is exactly what Ed Gein was doing. Psycho, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and The Silence of the Lambs are three of the biggest horror movies ever, and their villains are all based on one real human monster from Wisconsin. Ed Gein's story is proof that the scariest ideas aren't made up. They're discovered. Case to the town that dreaded sundown and the Phantom Killer. Okay, that was insane. But what if a movie was just a documentary of a real killer who was never caught? In 1976, a horror movie came out with a terrifying tagline. In 1946, this man killed 5 people. Today, he still lurks the streets of Texarkana, Arkansas. The movie was The Town That Dreaded Sundown, and it claimed to be a true story. Andy the what? The movie is about a real, unsolved series of murders committed by the Phantom Killer. The attack started in the spring of 1946. For 10 weeks, a killer in a hood attacked 8 people and killed 5 of them. They were called the Texarkana Moonlight Murders, just like the movie title says. Texarkana became a town that dreaded sundown. Even the famous Texas Rangers couldn't find him. The Phantom's last known attack was his craziest. He shot and killed a man named Virgil Starks right through his living room window. When his wife ran to call for help, she was shot twice, but miraculously survived. And then the Phantom Killer just disappeared. He was never heard from again. The case is still unsolved. The movie ends just like real life. The killer was never caught. It's like a crime report where the final page is just ripped out, leaving the mystery unsolved forever. He was a real-life boogeyman who haunted a town and then vanished. Section 2. Life imitates art, 6:30 to 8:30. Okay, this is where it gets even weirder. We've seen how real life inspires movies, but what happens when real life copies a horror movie? These are the cases that you just can't explain. Case 3. Orphan and the bizarre case of Natalia Grace in 2009. The horror movie Orphan came out. It's about a couple who adopts a 9-year-old girl named Esther, who turns out to be a 33-year-old woman with a rare disorder that makes her look like a child. It was a terrifying movie plot. And then, a year later, the exact same thing happened in real life. Meet Natalia Grace. In 2010, a couple adopted her. They thought she was a 6-year-old girl, just like the movie. The parents, Michael and Christine Barnett, claimed their new daughter wasn't who she said she was. They claimed she had adult teeth and was threatening to kill them and poison them. This story they told was a real-life version of the horror movie released just 1 year before they adopted her. It gets crazier. In 2012, the Barnetts went to court and legally changed Natalia's birth year, making her a 22-year-old adult. A year after that, they moved to Canada and left her alone in an apartment. This story is absolutely insane. Whether the Barnetts really believed they were in a horror movie, or they used the plot of Orphan as a blueprint for their stories, the result is a chilling mystery that ruined a young woman's life. Conclusion on CT 8:30 to 10 o'clock. So there you have it. Serial killers who inspired 3 of the biggest horror movies. A real-life boogeyman who was never caught, and a family who lived out the plot of Orphan. So what do you think? Are these just crazy coincidences? Or is there something more going on here? Is reality even scarier than fiction? The next time you watch a horror movie, you have to ask yourself, is this fake? Or did it actually happen? Which of these stories blew your mind the most? Let me know in the comments right now. I read every single one of them. And if you want more insane stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. Case 4. A Nightmare on Elm Street and Sudden Unexplained Nocturnal Death Syndrome 1. 2. Freddy is Coming For Ya. In 1984, Wes Craven gave us Freddy Krueger, a killer who murders you in your dreams. If he gets you in your dream, you die in real life. It sounds like pure fantasy, but the director got this idea from real life. I am not even kidding. Wes Craven said he was inspired by Los Angeles Times articles about Hmong refugees who had escaped genocide. A bunch of these refugees, all young, healthy men, were mysteriously dying in their sleep. The men all said they were having terrifying nightmares and were so scared of what was chasing them that they refused to sleep. Craven remembered one story in particular. A young man who survived the killing fields in Cambodia was terrified of sleeping. He told his parents that if he fell asleep, the thing in his nightmares would kill him. He stayed up for days, but finally passed out from exhaustion. In the middle of the night, his parents heard screaming. By the time they got to his room, he was dead. The autopsy found nothing wrong. He was literally killed by his own nightmare. It is as if his fear was an engine revving so high that his body just blew a gasket, even though all the parts were perfectly fine. And this wasn't just one guy. It happened so much it got a name. Sudden Unexplained Nocturnal Death Syndrome. Between 1981 and 1988, there were at least 117 cases among these refugees in the US and their culture. They even had a name for the spirit they believed was killing them, the Dab Suam, or Nightmare Spirit. Wes Craven took this real-life mystery and gave it a face. Freddy Krueger is the Dab Tuum, but with a sweater and a glove with knives. The horror of A Nightmare on Elm Street is the idea that sleep, when you're most vulnerable, can kill you. And that fear was real for these men. The movie's famous line, "Fall asleep," could have been said by the real victims. Craven didn't invent the idea of being killed by a night. He found it in the newspaper. Me do you This is absolutely crazy. If you think these stories are insane, smash that subscribe button right now, because what's coming next is even more unbelievable. Sección 3 Curses, we create possession and superstition horror movies, those stories about possession and curses. But what happens when people believe in this stuff so much that it leads to real-world horror? This is where things get truly tragic. Case 5. The exorcism of Emily Rose and the tragic death of Annalise. Michelle, have you seen The Exorcism of Emily Rose? The movie is about a priest who is put on trial for murder after a girl dies during an exorcism. It pits faith against science. What made it so terrifying was that it actually happened. This is a true story of Annalise Michel. Annalise was a young German woman from a religious family. When she was 16, she had a seizure and was diagnosed with epilepsy. After years of psychiatric treatment failed, Annalise and her family became convinced she was possessed by demons. They got permission from the church for an exorcism. What happened next is unbelievable. Over 10 months, 2 priests performed 67 exorcisms on her. During this time, Annalise refused to eat, thinking starving herself would drive the demons out. On July 1st, 1976, Annalise Michel died from malnutrition and dehydration. She was 23 years old and weighed only 68 pounds. Her death led to a massive trial. The 2 priests and her parents were charged with negligent homicide. The prosecution said Annalise was mentally ill and died because she didn't get medical care. The defense played the horrifying audio tapes in court as proof that she was really possessed. In the end, the court sided with the medical explanation and found them all guilty. The exorcism of Emily Rose follows this case almost exactly. Was it a real demon or a tragedy caused by a failure of medicine in Raven? Case 6. The hidden people and the burning of Bridget Cleary before science. People blame sickness on folklore and superstition. This next story is one of the most messed up things I have ever heard. It's the story of Bridget Cleary, a woman from 19th century Ireland who was killed by her husband because he thought she had been replaced by a fairy. March 1895, 26-year-old Bridget Cleary got sick. Her husband, Michael, became convinced that the real Bridget had been kidnapped by fairies, and the woman in their bed was a changeling, a fairy imposter. Oh, said you had to drive the changeling out with fire. The horror climaxed on the night of March 5th in a house full of people. Michael Cleary knocked her down and set her on fire with lamp oil, burning her to death. He then buried her body in a shallow grave. Michael's defense in court was that he didn't murder his wife, he killed a fairy. He was convicted of manslaughter. This horrific true story inspired the 2016 horror novel, The Hidden People. It's a chilling reminder that the scariest monsters aren't supernatural. They are the people who let superstition act like a virus of the mind. Sección 4. Echoes of Disaster. Fictional Catastrophes. And real tragedies. Some of the craziest horror stories aren't about one monster, but about huge disasters. And some of them are just retellings of real historical horror. Case 7. The Sacrament and the Jonestown Massacre. For our final story, we're looking at one of the biggest tragedies in history. On November 18th, over 900 people died in the Jonestown Massacre after their cult leader, Jim Jones, made them drink cyanide-laced Kool-Aid. It was a real-life nightmare. Decades later, in 2013, the found footage movie The Sacrament came out, and it's basically a play-by-play of what happened. The film follows journalists who visit a remote cult called Eden Parish run by a guy called Father. This film is a direct modern retelling of Jones. The character of Father is a perfect copy of Jim Jones. The end of The Sacrament is a terrifying recreation of the final hours of Jones. The found footage style makes you feel like you are there, watching people line up and give poison to their own children. This Sacrament shows how horror can make you relive historical trauma. Conclusión completa. Dice final. So there you have it, serial killers who inspired three of the biggest horror movies. A real-life bogeyman who was never caught, a family who lived out the plot of Orphan, and nightmares that actually killed people. We saw how belief in demons and fairies led to real death, and how one of the worst massacres in history was turned into a found footage horror movie. So what do you think? Are these just crazy coincidences, or is there something more going on here? Is reality even scarier than fiction? The next time you watch a horror movie, you have to ask yourself, is this fake, or did it actually happen? NCTA. Which of these stories blew your mind the most? Let me know in the comments right now. I read every single one of them. And if you want more insane stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next video.